live to Michael Atherton, former England captain himself, one of Key's Sky Sports commentary box colleagues until very recently indeed. Afternoon, Michael. Was Ben Stokes the only realistic option?
Yes, he was. He's the obvious choice. I think we're very good in England at overcomplicating matters and making life more difficult than it ought to be. There are only two players at the moment who are guaranteed their place in the side. One is Joe Root, who's just stood down from the captaincy. The other is Ben Stokes. He's proven to be a great cricketer over the years, very inspirational cricketer. He will lead from the front. The players will follow him. He's got great respect there as a cricketer and as a man. So absolutely the obvious choice at 30 years of age. It's a good time as well, neither too young nor too old. Should be in the prime years of his career. So yeah, straightforward choice in my view.
Nasser Hussain was on a couple of hours ago and said Stokes needs to be his own man in the role. How much advice should he take from Joe Root?
Well, I think the role of the former captain, from personal experience and just from being around those who've had to go back into the ranks, is that actually when you give the captaincy away, you're pretty happy to give the responsibility for making decisions away, and you just want to go and enjoy your cricket, score runs if you're a batsman, take wickets if you're a bowler. But equally, the way I did it with Nasser and Stewie, who followed me, and the way those guys did it with the captains that came after them, is to say, look, I'm here. If you need me, you're going to get my full support. If you want any advice, I'm here to give it. But I ain't going to be treading on your toes. It's your team now. You have to get on and do it in your own way. So kind of helpful without getting in the way, I think is the way to handle it. If I'm offering any advice to Joe Root, not that he necessarily would take my advice. And Ben Stokes obviously will be his own man. He's got a chance to shape that team now and take it in a different direction.
Oliver Brown in the Telegraph this morning, your old newspaper, thoughtful writer, award-winning writer, wrote, and I'm going to quote the whole paragraph so no one says I'm taking anything out of context, to foist such a psychological burden on a tortured soul who has in the past struggled with the grind of touring, let alone the added stress of leadership, feels not just peculiar but borderline irresponsible. What do you think?
Well, I disagree. I read the piece. And obviously Oliver was referencing a number of those events of the past, like the incident outside the nightclub in Bristol 2017-18 and events previous to that. But he's 30. He's certainly kept his nose clean over the last 2 or 3 years. There's a sense of maturity there. And as I say, I think he was the only realistic candidate. I can't think of anybody else that you could give that gig to. You could perhaps talk about Stuart Broad for a very interim period, but he's been out of the side. He's a fast bowler coming to the end of his career. Jos Buttler's not in the side. He's out at the IPL. So he was very much the obvious candidate. In terms of the recent past, when Ben Stokes stepped away for mental health reasons, I think he stepped away for 4 or 5 months before that Ashes tour. I don't see that as a sense of weakness. I see it actually as a sense of strength. The fact that he's been through these issues. It's something that Rob Key touched on there when he talked about Ben Stokes' empathy. Often really top-class players or great players, the game comes easily to them and they don't have that empathy with other players. They don't quite know how it is to struggle and go through difficult times, whereas Ben has clearly gone through a few of those periods himself, so he'll have that empathy with players around him. So I disagreed with the piece, but of course everybody is entitled to their opinion. That's one of the beauties of having a fairly diverse and plural media in this country.
Yeah, there will be plenty of opinions, as you well remember from your time in charge, Michael. It's striking to me that Rob Key, he talked a lot about let's not overcomplicate things. He said, we're going to pick the best England 11 to win any particular match. That would be quite a turnaround.
Yes, I mean, you think that would be obvious, wouldn't you? Just pick the best team to win the game in front of you. But England have got rather out of that way of thinking for some reasons not always in their control. The schedule with COVID catch-up, the way the pandemic has affected things, it has put a lot of pressure and tension on that fixture list and on the players under England's command. So, you know, England have been blameless to some extent, but I also think they have overcomplicated things in the recent past, thinking too far ahead of themselves. You know, what are we going to do in 4 test matches time when we play a day-night game under lights? And then they found themselves chasing their tail and picking a side that they should have picked for the previous game. So I think just keep it simple for now. The team needs a lift. They've won only 1 game in 17. They're bottom of the World Test Championship. What can we do to win the very next game? And then what can we do to win the game after that? And gradually you build some winning momentum. You hope to get a bit more continuity in the team. And you hope to then build a nucleus of a team, 6 or 7 players that can say, I am a first choice pick, rather than just 2 now. You've only got Root and Stokes, as I said before, that are obvious picks for the selectors or Rob and the coaches, if there are coaches in place when they come to pick the side. So I think slowly, by just keeping it simple and picking the team to win the game in front of you, everything else will fall into place.
What kind of coach does Ben Stokes need, and who should it be?
Good question. For the first thing to say is there may not be a coach in place in time. These things go through a process. I think May the 9th, job applications close or something. June the 2nd is the first test match. It's quite tight. That's not a bad thing in my view. I don't think since Andrew Strauss as an England captain really grabbed hold of the dressing room and said, this is my dressing room, I am going to run it. And if there is no coach in there, when Paul Farbrace was interim coach before Trevor Bayliss came in, that was actually when Ben Stokes came back into the side. And if there is no coach there, it will be a chance for Ben to absolutely grab it and mould it and say, this is the way we're going to run things. So not a disaster if a coach is not in place by June the 2nd. Who should it be? I mean, you know, all the candidates that have been talked about are very good candidates. Gary Kirsten's a good candidate. Simon Katic, an excellent candidate. So there'll be any number of people. So what I think is the right thing, though, is to split or look to split the job. Years ago, I said on our programmes at Sky that England needed to consider split coaching roles. If you look at the schedules now, they are so crammed, it is very difficult for one man to do everything. In the middle of the summer, England will be in Amsterdam, I think, for one-day internationals in the middle of a test series. How does one man plan for that? It's impossible. So, you know, last year when England were in Dubai and they were playing the World T20, the Ashes were coming up 2 weeks later. Impossible for one man to be in charge of all that. So I think splitting or looking to split responsibilities is exactly the right way to go. You have 2 distinct coaching staffs for Test cricket and limited overs cricket, and that will make life much easier.
I'll tell you what, you and Nasser are both absolutely brilliant at switching off a phone without interrupting your flow in any way, whatever. It's 1-1 between the two of you. Let me come back to Rob Key. Finally, were you impressed with your old mate's first appearance in his new role in front of the media?
Well, I'm actually up at Headingley. I thought first-class cricket is returning to Headingley for the first time in 200 and odd days. I thought I'd come and try and write a little fun piece about that. But I obviously listened to Rob talking to James Cole down there, and I've spoken to press colleagues who've just listened to him at Lord's. I think what I like about Rob, obviously he's a friend and like him and all that, but professional judgment is what you're after. And I think his instincts will be quite sound. I think what will be refreshing is that you couldn't get Rob to speak in management corporate speak if he tried. It would be impossible for him. He'd be incapable of it. And he'll give a more of a human face to an organisation that sometimes comes over as a little bit corporate. And I think people will enjoy that. He's pretty natural in front of the camera. But more important than that are the decisions that he'll make. I think his tenure will be defined by some of these early decisions. The decision to give Ben Stokes the captaincy, to be honest, will be his most straightforward decision. He's got some coaching decisions to make. He'll have to find a selector or a selection panel. Once those big decisions are in place, the job will rather take care of itself. But I think his instincts are pretty sound.
Michael, very enlightening as always. I take it it's a fairly chilly day at Headingley. Get back out there. Thanks very much.
Freezing.